Hello my dear brothers and sisters in Christ, this is Shiny with Jesus Bytes, and welcome back on our journey of exploring the Bible together. We will continue with the book of 2 Samuel, covering chapters 15 through 19 today. Absalom's revolt. After this, Absalom got himself a chariot, horses, and 50 men to run before him. He would get up early and stand beside the road leading to the city gate. Whenever anyone had a grievance to bring before the king for settlement, Absalom called out to him and asked, "What city are you from?" If he replied, "Your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel," Absalom said to him, "Look, your claims are good and right, but the king does not have anyone to listen to you." He added, "If only someone would appoint me judge in the land, then anyone who had a grievance or dispute could come to see me, and I would make sure he received justice." When a person approached to bow down to him, Absalom reached out his hand, took hold of him, and kissed him. Absalom did this to all the Israelites who came to the king for a settlement. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. When 4 years had passed, Absalom said to the king, "Please let me go to Hebron to fulfill a vow I made to the Lord. For your servant made a vow when I lived in Geshur of Aram, saying, 'If the Lord really brings me back to Jerusalem, I will worship the Lord in Hebron.'" "Go in peace," the king said to him. So he went to Hebron. Then Absalom sent messengers throughout the tribes of Israel with this message: "When you hear the sound of the ram's horn, you are to say, 'Absalom has become king in Hebron.'" 200 men from Jerusalem went with Absalom. They had been invited and were going innocently, for they knew nothing about the whole matter. While he was offering the sacrifices, Absalom sent for David's advisor Ahithophel, the Gilonite, from the city of Gilo. So the conspiracy grew strong, and the people supporting Absalom continued to increase. Then an informer came to David and reported, "The hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom." David said to all the servants with him in Jerusalem, "Get up, we have to flee, or we will not escape from Absalom. Leave quickly, or he will overtake us, heap disaster on us, and strike the city with the edge of the sword." The king's servants said to him, "Whatever my lord the king decides, we are your servants." Then the king set out, and his entire household followed him. But he left behind 10 concubines to take care of the palace. So the king set out, and all the people followed him. They stopped at the last house, where all his servants marched past him. Then all of the Cherethites, the Pelethites, and the Gittites, 600 men who came with him from Gath, marched past the king. The king said to Ittai the Gittite, "Why are you also going with us? Go back and stay with the king, since you are both a foreigner and an exile from your homeland. Besides, you only arrived yesterday. Should I make you wander around with us today, while I go wherever I can? Go back and take your brothers with you. May the Lord show you kindness and faithfulness." But in response, Ittai vowed to the king, As surely as the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, wherever my lord the king is, whether it means life or death, your servant will be there." "March on," David replied to Ittai. So Ittai, the Gittite, marched past with all his men and the children who were with him. Everyone in the countryside was weeping loudly while all the people were marching past. As the king was crossing the Kidron Valley, all the people were marching past the road that leads to the desert. Zadok was also there, and all the Levites with him were carrying the Ark of the Covenant of God. They set the Ark of God down, and Abiathar offered sacrifices until the people had finished marching past. Then the king instructed Zadok, "Return the Ark of God to the city. If I find favor in the Lord's eyes, he will bring me back and allow me to see both it and its dwelling place. However, if he should say, 'I do not delight in you,' then here I am. He can do with me whatever he pleases." The king also said to Zadok the priest, "Look, return to the city in peace, and your 2 sons with you, your son Ahimaaz and Abiathar's sons Jonathan. Remember, I'll wait at the folds of the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me." So Zadok and Abiathar returned the Ark of God to Jerusalem and stayed there. David was climbing the slope of the Mount of Olives, weeping as he ascended. His head was covered, and he was walking barefoot. Each of the people with him covered their heads and went up, weeping as they ascended. Then someone reported to David, "Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom." "Lord," David pleaded, "please turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness." When David came to the summit where he used to worship God, there to meet him was Hushai, the Archite, with his robe torn and dust on his head. David said to him, "If you go away with me, you'll be a burden to me. But if you return to the city and tell Absalom, 'I will be your servant, my king. Previously I was your father's servant, but now I will be your servant,' then you can counteract Ahithophel's counsel for me. Won't Zadok and Abiathar the priest be there with you? Report everything you hear from the king's palace to Zadok and Abiathar the priests. Take note, their 2 sons, Zadok's son Ahimaaz and Abiathar's son Jonathan, are there with them. Send me everything you hear through them." So Hushai, David's personal advisor, entered Jerusalem just as Absalom was entering the city. Ziba helps David. Chapter 16. When David had gone a little beyond the summit, Ziba, Mephibosheth's servant, was right there to meet him. He had a pair of saddle donkeys loaded with 200 loaves of bread, 100 clusters of raisins, 100 bunches of summer fruit, and a skin of wine. The king said to Ziba, "Why do you have these?" Ziba answered, "The donkeys are for the king's household to ride. The bread and the summer fruit are for the young men to eat, and the wine is for those who become exhausted to drink in the desert." "Where is your master's son?" the king asked. "Why, he's staying in Jerusalem." Ziba replied to the king, for he said, "Today the house of Israel will restore my father's kingdom to me." The king said to Ziba, "All that belongs to Mephibosheth is now yours." "I bow before you," Ziba answered. "May you look favorably to me, my lord the king." Shimei curses David. When King David got to Bahurim, a man belonging to the family of the house of Saul was just coming out. His name was Shimei, son of Gera, and he was yelling curses as he approached. He threw stones at David and at all the royal servants, the people and the warriors on David's right and left. Shimei said as he cursed, "Get out, you worthless murderer! The Lord has paid you back for all the blood of the house of Saul in whose place you rule. And the Lord has handed the kingdom over to your son Absalom. Look, you are in trouble because you are a murderer." Then Abishai, son of Zeruiah, said to the king, "Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and cut his head off." The king replied, "Sons of Zeruiah, do we agree on anything? He curses me this way because the Lord told him, 'Curse David.' Therefore who can say, 'Why did you do that?'" Then David said to Abishai and all his servants, "Look, my own son, my own flesh and blood, intends to take my life. How much more now this Benjaminite? Leave him alone and let him curse me. The Lord has told him to. Perhaps the Lord will see my affliction and restore goodness to me instead of Shimei's curses today." So David and his men proceeded along the road as Shimei was going along the ridge of the hill opposite him. As Shimei went, he cursed David and threw stones and dirt at him. Finally the king and all the people with him arrived exhausted, so they rested there. Absalom's advisors. Now Absalom and all the Israelites came to Jerusalem. Ahithophel was also with him. When David's friend Hushai the Archite came to Absalom, Hushai said to Absalom, "Long live the king! Long live the king!" "Is this your loyalty to your friend?" Absalom asked Hushai. "Why didn't you go with your friend?" "Not at all," Hushai answered Absalom. "I am on your side of the one that the Lord, the people, and all the men of Israel have chosen. I will stay with him. Furthermore, whom will I serve, if not his son? As I served in your father's presence, I will also serve in yours." Then Absalom said to Ahithophel, "Give me your advice. What should we do?" Ahithophel replied to Absalom, "Sleep with your father's concubines he left to take care of at the palace. When all Israel hears that you have become repulsive to your father, everyone with you will be encouraged." So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof, and he slept with his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. Now the advice of Ahithophel gave in those days was like someone asking about a word from God. Such was the regard that both David and Absalom had for Ahithophel's advice. Ahithophel said to Absalom, chapter 17, "Let me choose 12,000 men, and I will set out in pursuit of David tonight. I will attack him while he is weak and weary. throw him into a panic, and all the people with him will scatter. I will strike down only the king, and bring all the people back to you. When everyone returns except the man you're seeking, all the people will be at peace." This proposal seemed good to Absalom and all the elders of Israel. Then Absalom said, "Summon Hushai, the Archite, also. Let's hear what he has to say as well." So Hushai came to Absalom, and Absalom told him, "Ahithophel offered this proposal. Should we carry out this proposal? If not, what do you say?" Hushai replied to Absalom, "The advice Ahithophel has given this time is not good." Hushai continued, "You know your father and his men. They are warriors, and they are desperate like a wild bear robbed of her cubs. Your father is an experienced soldier who won't spend the night with the people. He's probably already hiding in one of the caves or some other place. If some of our troops fall first, someone is sure to hear and say, 'There's been a slaughter among the people who follow Absalom.' Then even a brave man with the heart of a lion will melt, because all Israel knows that your father and the valiant men with him are warriors. Instead, I advise that all Israel from Dan to Beersheba, as numerous as the sand by the sea, be gathered to you, and that you personally go into battle. Then we will attack David wherever we find him, and we will descend on him like a dew on the ground. Not even one will be left of all the men with him. If he retreats to some city, all Israel will bring ropes to that city, and we will drag its stones into the valley until not even a pebble can be found there. Since the Lord had decreed that Ahithophel's good advice be undermined in order to bring about Absalom's ruin." Absalom and all men of Israel said, "The advice of Hushai the Archite is better than Ahithophel's advice." David informed of Absalom's plans. Hushai then told the priests Zadok and Abiathar, "This is what Ahithophel advised Absalom and the elders of Israel, and this is what I advised. Now send someone quickly to tell David, 'Don't spend the night at the wilderness ford of the Jordan, but be sure to cross over, or the king and all the people with him will be destroyed.'" Jonathan and Ahimaaz were staying at Endroville, where a servant girl would come and pass along information to them, then in turn would go and inform King David, because they dared not be seen entering the city. However, a young man did see them and informed Absalom. So the two left quickly and came to the house of a man in Bahurim. He had a well in the courtyard, and they climbed down into it. Then his wife took the cover, placed it over the mouth of the well, and scattered grain on it so nobody would know anything. Absalom's servants came to the woman at the house and asked, "Where are Ahimaaz and Jonathan?" "They passed by toward the water," the woman replied to them. The men searched but did not find them, so they returned to Jerusalem. After they had gone, Ahimaaz and Jonathan climbed out of the well and went and informed King David. They told him, "Get up and immediately ford the river, for Ahithophel has given this advice against you." So David and all the people with him got up and crossed the Jordan. By daybreak, there was no one who had not crossed the Jordan. When Ahithophel realized that his advice had not been followed, he saddled his donkey and set out for his house in his hometown. He set his affairs in order and hanged himself. So he died and was buried in his father's tomb. David had arrived at Mahanaim by the time Absalom crossed the Jordan with all the men of Israel. Now Absalom had appointed Amasa over the army in Joab's place. Amasa was the son of a man named Ithra the Israelite. Ithra had married Abigail, daughter of Nahash. Abigail was the sister of Zeruiah, Joab's mother, and Israel and Absalom camped in the land of Gilead. When David came to Mahanaim, Shobhi, son of Nahash, from Rabbah of the Ammonites, Machir, son of Amiel, from Lodebar, and Barzillai, the Gileadite, from Rogelim, brought beds, basins, and pottery items. They also brought wheat, barley, flour, roasted grain, beans, lentils, honey, curds, sheep, and cheese from the herd for David and the people with him to eat. They have reasoned, the people must be hungry, exhausted, and thirsty in the desert. Absalom's defeat. Chapter 18. David reviewed his troops and appointed commanders of hundreds and of thousands over them. He then sent out the troops, 1/3 under Joab, 1/3 under Joab's brother Abishai, son of Zeruiah, and 1/3 under Ittai the Gittite. The king said to the troops, I will also march out with you. You must not go, the people pleaded. If we have to flee, they will not pay any attention to us. Even if half of us die, they will not pay any attention to us because you are worth 10,000 of us. Therefore, it is better if you support us from the city. I will do whatever you think is best, the king replied to them. So he stood beside the gate while the troops marched out by hundreds and thousands. The king commanded Joab, Abishai, and Ittai, treat the young man Absalom gently for my sake. All the people heard the king's orders to all the commanders about Absalom. Then David's forces marched into the field to engage Israel in battle, which took place in the forest of Ephraim. The people of Israel were defeated by David's soldiers, and the slaughter there was vast that day, 20,000 casualties. The battle spread over the entire region, and the day the forest claimed more people than the sword. Absalom's death. Absalom was riding on his mule when he happened to meet David's soldiers. When the mule went under the tangled branches of a large oak tree, Absalom's head was caught fast in the tree. The mule under him kept going, so he was suspended in midair. One of the men saw him and informed Joab. He said, I just saw Absalom hanging in an oak tree. You just saw him? Joab exclaimed. Why didn't you strike him to the ground right there? I would have given you 10 silver pieces and a belt. The man replied to Joab, even if I had the weight of 1,000 pieces of silver in my hand, I would not raise my hand against the king's son. For we heard the king command you, Abishai and Ittai, protect the young man Absalom for me. If I had jeopardized my own life, and nothing is hidden from the king, you would have abandoned me." Joab said, "I am not going to waste time with you." He then took 3 spears in his hand and thrust them into Absalom's heart while he was still alive in the oak tree. And 10 young men who were Joab's armor-bearers surrounded Absalom, struck him, and killed him. Afterwards, Joab blew the ram's horn, and the troops broke off their pursuit of Israel because Joab restrained them. They took Absalom, threw him into a large pit in the forest, and piled a huge mound of stones over him. And all Israel fled, each to his tent. When he was alive, Absalom had erected for himself a pillar in the king's valley, for he had said, "I have no son to preserve the memory of my name." So he gave the pillar his name. It is still called Absalom's monument today. Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, said, "Please let me run and tell the king the good news that the Lord has delivered him from his enemies." Joab replied to him, "You are not the man to take the good news today. You may do it another day, but today you aren't taking good news, because the king's son is dead." Joab then said to the Cushite, "Go tell the king what you have seen." The Cushite bowed to Joab and took off running. However, Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, persisted and said to Joab, "No matter what, please let me run too behind the Cushite." Joab replied, "My son, why do you want to run since you won't get a reward?" "No matter what, I want to run." "Then run," Joab said to him. So Ahimaaz ran by the way of the plain and outran the Cushite. David was sitting between the 2 gates when the watchman went up to the roof of the gate and over the wall. The watchman looked out and saw a man running alone. He called out and told the king. The king said, "If he's alone, he bears good news." As the first runner came closer, the watchman saw another man running. He called out to the gatekeeper, "Look, another man is running alone." "This one is also bringing good news," said the king. The watchman said, "The way the first man runs looks to me like the way Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, runs. This is a good man. He comes with good news," the king commented. Ahimaaz called out to the king, "All is well," and then bowed down to the king with his face to the ground. He continued, "May the Lord your God be praised. He delivered up the men who rebelled against my lord the king." The king asked, "Is the young man, Absalom, all right?" Ahimaaz replied, "When Joab sent the king's servant and your servant, I saw a big disturbance, but I don't know what it was." The king said, "Move aside and stand here." So he stood to the side. Just then the Cushite came and said, "May my lord the king hear the good news. Today the Lord has delivered you from all rising up against you." The king asked the Cushite, "Is the young man Absalom all right?" The Cushite replied, "May what has become of the young man happen to the enemies of any of my lord the king, and to all who rise up against you with evil intent." The king was deeply moved and went up to the gate chamber and wept. As he walked, he cried, "My son Absalom, my son Absalom. If only I had died instead of you. Absalom, my son, my son." David's kingdom restored. Chapter 19. It was reported to Joab, "The king is weeping. He is mourning over Absalom." That day's victory was turned into mourning for all the troops, because on that day the troops heard, "The king is grieving over his son." So they returned to the city quietly that day, like people come in when they were humiliated after fleeing in battle. But the king hid his face and cried out at the top of his voice, "My son Absalom, Absalom, my son, my son." Then Joab went into the house to the king and said, "Today you have shamed all your soldiers, those who rescued your life and the lives of your sons and daughters, your wives and your concubines. You love your enemies and hate those who love you. Today you have made it clear that the commanders and the soldiers mean nothing to you. In fact, today I know that if Absalom were alive and all of us were dead, it would be fine with you. Now get up, go out and encourage your soldiers. For I swear by the Lord that if you don't go out, not a man will remain with you tonight. This will become worse for you than all the trouble that has come to you from your youth until now." So the king got up and sat in the gate, and all the people were told, "Look, the king is sitting in the gate." Then they all came into the king's presence. Meanwhile, each Israelite had fled to his tent. All the people among all the tribes of Israel were arguing, "The king delivered us from the grasp of our enemies, and he rescued us from the grasp of the Philistines. But now he has fled from the land because of Absalom. But Absalom, the man we anointed over us, has died in battle. So why do you say nothing about restoring the king?" King David sent word to the priests, Zadok and Abiathar, "Say to the elders of Judah, why should you be the last to restore the king to his palace? The talk of all Israel has reached the king at his house. You are my brothers, my flesh and blood. So why should you be the last to restore the king? And tell Amasa, aren't you my flesh and blood? May God punish me and do so severely if you don't become commander of the army from now on instead of Joab." So he won over all men of Judah, and they sent word to the king, "Come back, you, all your servants." Then the king returned. When he arrived at the Jordan, Judah came to Gilgal to meet the king and escort him across the Jordan. Shimei, son of Gera, a Benjaminite from Bahraim, hurried down with the men of Judah to meet King David. There were 1,000 men from Benjamin with him. Ziba, an attendant from the house of Saul, with his 15 sons and 20 servants, also rushed down to Jordan ahead of the king. They forded the Jordan to bring the king's household across and do whatever the king desired. When Shimei, son of Gera, crossed the Jordan, he fell down before the king and said to him, "My lord, don't hold me guilty, and don't remember your servant's wrongdoing on the day my lord the king left Jerusalem. May the king not take it to heart, for your servant knows that I have sinned. But look, today I am the first of the entire house of Joseph to come down to meet my lord the king." Abishai, son of Zeruiah, asked, "Shouldn't Shimei be put to death for this, because he ridiculed the Lord's anointed?" David answered, "Sons of Zeruiah, do we agree on anything? Have you become my adversary today? Should any man be killed in Israel today, Am I not aware that today I am king over Israel?" So the king said to Shimei, "You will not die." Then the king gave him his oath. Mephibosheth, Saul's grandson, also went down to meet the king. He had not taken care of his feet, trimmed his mustache, or washed his clothes from the day the king left until the day he returned safely. When he came from Jerusalem to meet the king asked him, "Mephibosheth, why didn't you come over with me?" "My lord the king," he replied, "my servant Ziba betrayed me. Actually, your servant said, 'I'll saddle the donkey for myself, so that I may ride it and go with the king, for your servant is lame.' Ziba slandered your servant to my lord the king. But my lord the king is like the angel of God, so do whatever you think best, for my grandfather's entire family deserves death from my lord the king, but you set your servant among those who eat at your table. So what further right do I have to keep on making appeals to the king?" The king said to him, "Why keep on speaking about these matters of yours? I hereby declare you and Ziba are to divide the land." Mephibosheth said to the king, "Instead, since my lord the king has come to his palace safely, let Ziba take it all." Barzillai, the Gileadite, had come down from Rogelim and accompanied the king to the Jordan River to see him off at the Jordan. Barzillai was a very old man, 80 years old, and since he was a very wealthy man, he had provided for the needs of the king while he stayed in Mahanaim. The king said to Barzillai, "Cross over with me, and I will provide for you at my side in Jerusalem." Barzillai replied to the king, "How many years of my life are left that I should go up to the Jerusalem with the king? I am now 80 years old. Can I discern what is pleasant and what is not? Can your servant taste what he eats or drinks? Can I still hear the voice of male and female singers? Why should your servant be an added burden to my lord the king? Since your servant is only going with the king a little way across the Jordan, why should the king repay me with such a reward? Please let your servant return so that I may die in my own city near the tomb of my father and mother. But here is your servant Chimham. Let him cross over with my lord the king. Do for him what seems good to you." The king replied, "Chimham will cross over with me, and I will do for him what seems good to you, and whatever you desire from me, I will do for you." So all the people crossed the Jordan, and the king crossed. The king kissed Barzillai and blessed him, and Barzillai returned to his home. The king went on to Gilgal, and Chimham went with him. All the troops of Judah and half of Israel escorted the king. Suddenly, all the men of Israel came to the king. They asked him, "Why did our brothers, the men of Judah, take you away secretly and transport the king and his household across the Jordan, along with all of David's men?" All the men of Judah responded to the men of Israel, "Because the king is our relative. Why does this make you angry? Have we ever eaten anything of the king's or been honored at all?" The men of Israel answered the men of Judah, "We have 10 shares in the king, so we have greater claim to David than you. Why then do you despise us? Weren't we the first to speak of restoring our king?" But the words of the men of Judah were harsher than those of the men of Israel. The word of the Lord. Have a blessed day. Ciao.